Welcome everybody to Voices of Environmental Justice. My name's Barb Church, and I'm one of the organizers of this event, along with, and I'd like for you to stand up, Oneida Arnold, Norma Ramirez, and Les Pogue. We're members of the conversation who's sponsoring this event. The Conversation is a think tank group that promotes social justice through ideas, ideals, and action. And we're taking action today by having this forum. We have an awesome group of environmental experts to speak and share information with you. We're aware of the intersection between social justice and environmental justice. It's our hope that you leave here today with information that incites vision to face the challenges of not only saving our environment from the kind of industry that destroys it, but creating a better environment that's healthier and greener. So it's important that we recognize that we are all standing on occupied land. This is the ancestral land of the Puyallup Nation. So I'd like to invite Annette Bryan up here to begin this forum with an opening prayer.
I see one of my kids' teachers back there. Hi! Haxlahale, good day. My name is Annette Bryan. I am a member of the Puyallup Tribal Council, and it is an honor to be here speaking with you this evening. I will open up in a prayer, so pray in your own way. Grandfather Creator, Creator God, I want to thank you today for the gift of life. I want to thank you, Creator God, for bringing each one of us here safely. I want to thank you for the wisdom of our ancestors, and thank you for the teachings of Mother Earth. Thank you for all of these kind and concerned souls who know that we have to protect you in order to sustain ourselves. Ask Grandfather Creator that you continue to watch over our children and our elders and those that are not yet born, Creator God. And I thank you and pray that this dialogue will result in moving the dial, that we can all work towards doing the right thing and having our elected officials do the next right thing, Creator God. So with that, I pray that each and every one is welcome to our homeland on the sacred place where our beautiful Mount Tacoma sends water down for us that sustains our fish, our shellfish, and all living things, Creator God. So I ask these things, Creator God, and blessings for each and every one, and for our families and future generations, all my relations. Aho. So thank you for being here tonight. Is this my turn?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have a presentation, but I was asked to come and speak a little bit about the Puyallup tribe's position and opposition to the Puget Sound Energy's liquefied natural gas plant on the Tacoma tide flats, which are on our ancestral tide lands. I have a master's in civil and environmental engineering from Tufts University, and I have worked for the Environmental Protection Agency prior to working at the Puyallup Tribe, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, for 10 years, and prior to that worked for the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, which used to be called Puget Sound, PSAPCA, Puget Sound Pollution Control Agency. Anyhow, I was an air inspector on the Tacoma Tide Flats. So that's, and then prior to that, I wrote some of the first air quality regulations on tribal land under an EPA grant for the Puyallup Tribe of Indians way back in 1990. So I have a long experience and history in environmental studies and actual environmental work at the local and federal and tribal level. And this project, the Liquefied Natural Gas Plant project, actually came to my attention when I saw Annette, and where's Annette? And some others were neighbors in the 98422 zip code, and they were rallying with this no LNG stuff. And then I started seeing it on Facebook, and I thought, what is this? What's going on here? So then my son and I actually went and took signs and held signs up in our neighborhood. And this is about 2014, 2015, maybe 2015. And then we did a really fun rally, for those of you who were there and remember it, on the bridge where we had the lights, and by the Chihuly Bridge in Tacoma. So just different rallies and being interested in different ways. And during this time I was running for tribal council, and then actually got elected to the tribal council, at which point the attorneys immediately told me not to speak about this in public, because every single word I say now represents the tribal government. And so I'm not just Annette Bryan citizen, but I'm Annette Bryan, a representative of the tribal government. And so it was a really interesting first year to just understand why it is, and that was because we're in litigation with the state on their issuance of the permit with the Pollution Control Hearings Board. We're still actually in litigation, so I don't talk about those things. But I did say to my attorneys and the rest of my counsel that I am a mother and I am a daughter, and my children and my grandchildren and my mother and myself all live in the blast zone. We're all in the 98422 zip code. And I have to say something, because I don't understand the impacts of this plant. I don't understand the potential. I don't understand what will happen, how safe we will or won't be, should there be an explosion or should there be any leaks. I just don't feel like this project has been adequately analyzed, and that the public, that myself as a neighbor of this facility, have been adequately informed about what kind of risk there is to me. So that's the first statement or level of interest that I had in this facility. The next level of interest I have as an elected official for the Puyallup Tribe of Indians is that this facility is any facility that's built on tribal lands, and this facility is on fee land, which is not held in ownership by the tribe, but it's on our original tide lands, and it is very clearly within the boundaries of the Puyallup Reservation, and it's in the Tacoma Tide Flats. And we have an historic land claim settlement in 1990 that says that all jurisdictions have to consult with the Puyallup Tribe of Indians when they're doing any significant land use changes on the Puyallup Reservation. And so from the governmental standpoint, the tribe was not adequately consulted. There may have been a letter sent from the city to the tribe. There may have been a letter sent from the state to the tribe. But that is not consultation. And so that is another statement that I can say as an elected official, that the tribe was not adequately consulted on this project. Had we been consulted, we would have shared all the concerns that we're now sharing about the potential impacts of the safety plan, the fire safety plan. Hopefully some of the panelists will talk to you about the facts and details. I didn't come prepared to talk about those today. But just to say that the Puyallup Tribe of Indians is adamantly opposed to this. And we have figured and there are reasons for that, and there are technical reasons, and hopefully you'll hear from some of those experts this evening. And I really ask, if you're neighbors or community members and you're impacted, because you don't live within 400 feet of this facility, which is all the required the plant to notify people was 400 feet around it. So if you live outside of that, and I live 1.5 miles away, right inside, neatly inside the blast zone, then you want to hear about this project, and you should be very concerned. And I think that the city of Tacoma right now is our next challenge, to really challenge the people that represent you on the Tacoma City Council to hear your concerns, should you have them after tonight, and I think you should, and let them know that you want a supplemental environmental impact statement so that your concerns can be answered and addressed. And the tribe is doing everything within its power to have our concerns be known. Not only do we care about our people, we care about our tidelands, our shellfish, our water, the cumulative impacts, which no agency studies. That's a bigger conversation for down the road, but we really have to start thinking about our Tacoma and our tide flats and our future and our generations and our unborn children, because what are they going to live in if we keep polluting and contaminating their environment? So I think my time is up. I'm not timing myself, but I want to welcome you all tonight, and I really want to thank the hosts for this event for putting this together, and all the experts that came to speak to you tonight. They're really good points, and I hope you ask a lot of questions and really let the city of Tacoma know that a supplemental environmental statement is our next step. And I also want to thank the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency for doing the right thing and analyzing. They had an environmental impact statement, and they decided to do a supplemental impact statement, cradle to grave. This stuff is so horrible. It's not clean. It's just not clean. If you look at the fracking and the leaks in the lines, it really pollutes the environment just as much as coal from what I understand. So anyway, I'll let the experts tell you all those facts and details, but my name is Annette Bryan. I'm at the Puyallup Tribe of Indians. I can be found on their website, and I welcome any interaction, information, questions, and dialogue, and thank you all for being here tonight to care about Mother Earth and our community.
Thank you, Annette. And now I'd like to bring up here Tarika Powell, who's a national expert on liquefied natural gas.
Good evening, and thanks everybody for joining us together this evening when you could have been doing other things. Very wonderful to see that you decided to be here with us instead to learn more about this issue and to talk about it as a community. I'm going to start my timer because I'm Southern. I can go on, and they have a pretty tight schedule here this evening. But one thing I was thinking about as I was driving into the city, I live in Seattle. I moved here from, moved here from Atlanta, lived basically all around the South, originally from Arkansas. And I love Tacoma. Any excuse to come down here and talk, I say yes every time. One of the reasons is that Tacoma reminds me a lot of Little Rock, Arkansas, where I'm from. And a lot of times when I'm driving into the city, I will be reminded of my hometown and things that I experienced when I was growing up. And this one story that was on my mind is that I wanted to sort of open with this evening is one time when I was a kid, my uncle, and when you're Southern, you have a lot of aunts and uncles that you don't know how they're actually related to you, but they could have been your mom's friend in high school, and they're now your aunt your entire life. Oh, I had this uncle who was teaching me how to play this card game called Spades. if you're African American, you know spades. And a lot of other people in this room might know spades, but it's basically kind of a game where you play with 4 people, ideally, two people on a team playing against each other, and you have to play your cards, and it's, you know, diamonds beats hearts, clubs beats diamonds, spades beats everything. And so you try to throw out the cards on your team that would beat the cards the other team is throwing out, and you get what's called a book. When you get all 4 cards together, that's a book. And so my uncle was trying to teach me how to play spades when I was about 8 years old, and I maybe had 4 cards left in my hand. And he threw out a card that I could beat with 2 cards in my hand, and I wanted to throw out the biggest one. And since I was a child, I was leaning over so he could see every card that was in my hand. And he could see that it wouldn't be a good idea for me to play that card, because if I played that card, I would get that book, but I would lose the other 3 books in the game, and so I would lose the game. And so what he told me, I did not understand until I was very much an adult. What he told me was, all money ain't good money. All money is not good money. And as a working class black girl in Arkansas, I couldn't understand the concept of something, any kind of money not being good money. But what he said was, if you throw that card and take this hand, you're going to lose the other 3. But if you play the other card, then you'll actually win the other 3 hands and you'll win the game. So don't jump on the first thing that you see, because all money ain't good money. And it's been my experience in dealing with city of Tacoma on the issue of methanol and on the issue of LNG, that we're dealing with politicians down here who don't understand the concept that all money ain't good money. And it seems that any kind of, project, people with money that come through and want to build something, they feel that it's their obligation to accept that thing, and that it's automatically going to be good for the city because it's somebody coming here offering us money or offering us jobs. And there's not a lot of weighing of the pros and cons of these opportunities. There's not a lot of proactive looking at how can we bring good money to the city. And this LNG terminal is just another example of that. And this LNG terminal was proposed around the same time as the methanol terminal. And it's hard to believe that one body of elected officials can make so many terrible decisions in such a short amount of time. And so, you all have lived here through the methanol issue, and you know that basically there was a citizens' uprising in the city of Tacoma to stop that terminal, and which is a wonderful thing. One of the tough things for this LNG fight that we've been going through is that as wonderful as that fight was, it kind of tired everybody out. So when they hear that there's this other facility going on at the same time, people are like, well, didn't we just beat this? Wait, didn't I just go to those meetings? Is this the same thing? What is LNG? What are they talking about? And so we've had, over the past 3 years that I've been working on this issue, sort of the uphill battle of, telling people, we appreciate that you came out 5 o'clock on a Wednesday night with your whole family and children to defeat that terminal, but we got another issue here. And another difficult thing has been explaining to people what the issue is. And so I'm going to try to do that this evening in really the plainest, simplest terms that I can. And if I don't succeed in that, we'll have a Q&A afterwards. And so at Sightline Institute, where I work in Seattle, it's an sustainability policy organization. We work on environment, we work on affordable housing, we work on democracy reform. How to make our democracy sustainable. And we, in terms of our fossil fuel fights that we get involved in, what we are trying to do is to prevent the West Coast from becoming a shipping hub for large-scale export terminals, such as big coal terminals, big oil terminals. The industry is trying to turn the West Coast into a shipping hub simply because we're closer to Asia, and they will save millions of dollars on shipping if they ship it from here instead of shipping it from the East Coast or the Gulf Coast. And so it's really a matter of geographic accident that we have been kind of flooded with proposals to site the world's largest coal terminals, large oil by rail terminals. And the third threat that we've been seeing along those lines is natural gas. And so we focus on those export projects in order to basically prevent the West Coast from getting a Gulf Coast makeover. We like the look that we have right now. We don't want to get that cosmetic upgrade or downgrade, and so we were trying to prevent that. And in fact, this LNG terminal in Tacoma that I've been working on for the last 3 years is the only local project that my organization is fighting. Every other project that we are working on is a large-scale export proposal. This project, in the grand scheme of things, would be considered sort of small beans comparative to the other terminals. And the reason being that I was so deeply disturbed by the lack of adequate environmental review that this project received. I had never seen anything like it. The proposal was not adequately reviewed in terms of what kind of pollution this facility is going to generate. It's going to generate quite a bit more than is stated in the environmental documents. It was not adequately reviewed from a safety perspective. And in fact, when I read the environmental impact statement, I got involved in this issue because we had an open house about this time 3 years ago in 2015, and someone from Tacoma was at our open house and said that, can you take a look at the facility down in Tacoma? Because I think that it's going to be a different type of facility than what they're saying it is. And what they were saying it was at the time was a facility that was going to provide gas to local customers and provide a little bit to the shipping industry. And so that type of facility is pretty common, and it wasn't on my radar. Like I said, I work on export terminals. But from some of the things that the person said, I decided to look into it. And a couple of weeks later, after looking into it, I read through all 300-something pages of the environmental assessment. And by the time I got done reading the environmental assessment, I really didn't know much more about the project than I did before I started reading it, which is not the purpose of an environmental assessment. It's supposed to tell me everything I need to know about the project so that I can know if this is something that I want in my community or not. And so by the time I got done reading the document, I still couldn't tell if it's the type of facility they're saying it is, because it just didn't even include an accurate description of what they're going to be doing at the terminal. And so I had to then go through the appendices, see if they would tell me. And read through the appendices, got all the way to Appendix J, the very last one. And that's where I finally found out what the terminal was going to be doing. And it was not what the company was saying the terminal was going to be doing. It's actually going to be, I found in a shipping hub for fueling LNG fueled vessels with LNG. That's about 93% of the fuel, LNG, that's going to be produced at that facility is going to go to the shipping industry, 7% to local customers. Well, they were talking about it like it was the inverse, 93% to local customers, a little bit, 7% to shipping, but that's not what the project is. And so at that point I realized that this actually is a new type of LNG terminal. It's called a bunkering terminal. There were, at the time I started looking at this facility, only one existing in the United States. It's much smaller in scope and scale than the one they're going to build here in Tacoma. So there's less safety hazards when you're doing less things at a facility. And so because it's a new type of terminal, I felt that it should have received a higher degree of scrutiny in the safety review so that we can make sure, since we don't already have a lot of evidence and experience with running this type of terminal, we need to make sure that when we're approving these new types of terminals, that we're applying the highest level of scrutiny in order to protect people, particularly based on where this facility is going to be located. A LNG terminal is traditionally located at least a mile from any populated area. And that is the simplest kind that I originally thought this facility was. Not the type of facility that is going to be doing as many different things that are going on at this terminal. This terminal is going to be loading LNG onto marine tankers. It's going to be loading LNG onto LNG tanker trucks that are going to be traveling through the city. It's going to also be providing some for local customers. That's the part that's been tried and tested in terms of safety. And that's the 7% that's been tried and tested. The 93%, where we're talking about marine bunkering and where we're talking about trucks going, LNG tanker trucks going through a populated area, that's the part that hasn't been tried and tested and proven to be safe, especially in a populated area. And so when I saw that this facility was being treated as a different type of facility than it actually is, that the environmental review and safety review were treating it like it was a different type of facility, as if the people who were reviewing it didn't actually know what type of facility they were reviewing, then I said, okay, I had to go to my boss and convince him. I really want to spend all my time working on this LNG terminal, this small LNG terminal in Tacoma, because this small LNG terminal in Tacoma could cause a major disaster for the people who live in Tacoma. It is not following any safety standards in terms of where it's sited away from the population. It's not following guidelines for the marine. There's a number of guidelines that apply to the marine shipping industry, and they have issued guidelines on what do you do when you're running a terminal like this, because there's some that are already existing in Europe. And so they have been putting out guidance to try to help lawmakers as lawmakers try to catch up with changes in the industry. And so that guidance I read, I ordered it. A lot of it is behind a paywall. You have to be in the industry to get access to it, paying $150 for a little 20-page book. But paid for it, read it. And this terminal is not following any of the guidelines that are put out by the industry itself, the natural gas industry itself, on how you operate a terminal like this. Not a single one of the major safety guidelines are being followed. And so this is why I've gotten so concerned about this issue and why I'm down here in Tacoma speaking about it all the time, primarily from a safety perspective for the community. Secondary issue, which is also important, is that we're dealing with right now is we're at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to how we look at and understand natural gas. Some people in this room grew up after me. Some people in this room grew up way before me. Some of us grew up at the same time. But let's talk about those who grew up at the same time and before me. You probably remember these videos that used to, commercials. They used to come on TV all the time, in the 90s at least, and before, about the little blue flame, natural gas. It's the answer to all of our problems. It's clean fuel. It's going to replace all this dirty stuff. It's a miracle, and we should all be thankful for it. And even recently, when I went to see Black Panther earlier this year. Was that earlier this year? Okay, time flies. I'm sitting in the movie theater, and now I'm a natural gas researcher. This is what I do. And so I know that those commercials from the 90s were inaccurate, to say the least, and I'll talk a little bit about why. But I'm sitting in the movie theater trying to watch Black Panther. I'm just so excited. I got my black superhero movie finally. I'm here. I got my ticket 2 months in advance. I showed up to the theater 2 hours early. I'm ready. Show me Black Panther. But before I could get to my Black Panther, I had to see an ad for clean natural gas that had some of my favorite singers in there singing this ridiculous song about how we're all going to walk into the future hand in hand thanks to natural gas. And y'all don't know me, but I was in the theater and I literally said out loud, "These are lies. It's all lies." And it's not that I want you to be that person, but I want to tell you why I feel so strongly. So contrary to what we learned from these commercials, the miseducation we learned about the little blue flame from these commercials, what we know now, the reason that we have this obsession with natural gas in the United States goes back to the energy crisis in the 70s, when we were trying to become less dependent on foreign oil. We wanted to have use whatever kind of energy reserves we had in the United States that could make us less dependent on foreign oil. And we happen to have an abundance of natural gas and not an abundance of oil. And so the industry, the fossil fuel industry, said, oh, we have a solution for you. It's called natural gas. Well, it wasn't called natural gas then. It was called methane gas, which is what it is. It is methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas. When it's released into the atmosphere, it captures heat, it warms the atmosphere, contributes to global climate change. And but methane gas doesn't sound like something I want in my house. So the industry rebranded it natural gas, because it's naturally occurring. You can find it in the ground in wells, formation of gas wells. You can find it when you are mining coal. Methane gas naturally exists in there. When you are mining an oil formation, natural gas exists, methane gas exists naturally in there. And so the industry was mining coal, mining oil, and just releasing all this methane gas straight into the atmosphere. And it said, well, we can market that and we can sell that. They're looking for something to replace these other things. And so the methane gas became natural gas because that sounded more like something people want to cook their food with than methane. But natural gas is primarily composed of about 95% of methane gas, which again is a greenhouse gas, a smaller portion ethane, butane, propane. And so all these gases come from the natural gas stream. And so the industry also came up with a way to make you want to use natural gas. And that messaging said that natural gas is cleaner than everything else. Natural gas is a bridge fuel to renewables. So if we want to get off of dirty fossil fuels like coal and oil, we can use natural gas in the meantime until the renewable technology is ready for us to use. So back in the 70s, it was proposed as a bridge between fossil fuels and renewables, even though natural gas itself is a fossil fuel. Okay, how am I going to use this as a bridge between two things when it's on the other side? How are you going to be the bridge when you're over here with the other side? But, so in order to make it seem cleaner, what the industry has done is to take a look at a small slice of the emissions profile of natural gas and leave out the rest of the picture. When you look at the entire picture, you see that it is a similar profile to coal and oil. But when you look at this narrow slice, and this narrow slice is what emissions does it produce when you burn it at the point of combustion. So let's say I have three things that can produce energy. One can run on coal, one can run on gas, or natural gas, and one can run on oil. And I'm taking measurements of, I have them in 3 boxes producing energy. I'm taking measurements of those 3 boxes. How much pollution are they generating? Well, the coal is going to generate the most, and then the oil, and then the natural gas. When I'm just looking at the point of combustion, and when you hear about natural gas being 50% cleaner than coal, you're hearing about the point of combustion. That's not where the problem with natural gas is. The problem with natural gas is what happens before you reach the point of combustion. Because it's a gas, it leaks everywhere. And like I said, it's a greenhouse gas. So when it leaks directly into the atmosphere, it's contributing to global climate change. Now, when I get it to my point of combustion and I burn it and I take those measurements, what I'm measuring is how much carbon dioxide is it emitting. We've all probably heard of carbon dioxide because that's the greenhouse gas that every government in the world is trying to lessen. We all need to lessen carbon dioxide, CO2 emissions, and put a cap on CO2, put a price on it. Well, methane is, over a 20-year time frame, over 80 times worse at trapping heat in the atmosphere than CO2. So why would we be using natural gas to replace fossil fuels that emit CO2 when the natural gas is leaking directly into the atmosphere and it is causing consequences that are over 80 times worse than the thing I'm trying to fix? And so then the industry says, well, don't look at over a 20-year time frame. You know, these things with climate, they take centuries. Let's look at it over a 100-year time frame. So we look at it over a 100-year time frame. Over a 100-year time frame, instead of being more than 80 times worse, it's only about 25 times worse when you look at it over a 100-year time frame. And so that to me is no comfort, okay? If I get sick from eating something and then the next day you tell me, well, eat this thing instead, it's only going to make you 25 times sicker, that's not very appealing, is it? And so when we're dealing with the fossil fuel industry, what we have to do, the natural gas industry, what we have to do is look at the life cycle of the gas, not just the point of combustion. The life cycle means looking at the leaks that are coming out of the pipelines, looking at the emissions, looking at the site of extraction where they take the natural gas out of the ground and a lot of it gets vented into the atmosphere. When scientists have done studies that quantify how much is going in the atmosphere at the extraction site, how much is going in the atmosphere on the pipelines, with the leakage rate is where we get, and you add all of that together, then you see that natural gas is actually not that much cleaner than coal from a climate perspective in terms of global warming and climate change. It's not that much better than coal, and it could possibly be worse depending on how much is leaking. The problem is we have no clue how much is leaking. Methane gas is invisible. It doesn't have an odor. When you get it in your house, they have added an odorant to it so that you can tell if it's leaking so you can get out of the house. But when it's leaking, otherwise, before the odorant is added, it's invisible, it has no odor, and so it's very difficult to quantify this problem to people when we say, you know what, in the 70s, we didn't actually know everything that we know now about natural gas. We have studied it more, we have made comparisons, and we know that actually it's not a bridge, it's over there with the other fossil fuels that we need to put in the past. But the public, over all these decades, has received so much false messaging about natural gas being cleaner, natural gas being a partner with renewables. Natural gas might as well be a renewable if you let the fossil fuel industry tell it, which is not the case. And so one of the issues that you all are facing here in Tacoma, and that I face as a researcher who works on natural gas issues, is that I am trying to explain something to people when they have a long-held belief that is the exact opposite of the truth. And sadly, some people would rather hold on to their long-held beliefs if the truth is going to be too inconvenient. But where we are now, I believe, is at a point where, as a society, we are looking at getting off coal, and no matter what any politicians who shall not be named say, the coal industry is not coming back. It's absolutely dead from a international financial perspective. And so coal used to be what we used to generate most of our electricity. And so we're looking for something to replace that coal as coal terminals are being retired. And a lot of the energy industry, including utility companies like Puget Sound Energy, are looking at natural gas to replace that because it's convenient, it's easy, and then you have the fossil fuel industry that is looking at the potential loss of profits from this one product, and so they're pushing the other product more heavily. And actually, if you look at the people who are the big wigs in the natural gas industry, you got Shell, Chevron, BP, all these major oil companies, because they see natural gas as the future of fossil fuels, because people are so deeply under the misconception that this is a clean fuel, that their work is sort of already, a lot of the work is already done for them. It has a built-in messaging. You don't have to go and rename methane. It was renamed decades ago. And with people looking at for a future that is cleaner, with cleaner fuels. They're jumping onto that messaging. When you look at natural gas companies, you see that they'll be called things like Clean Energy LLC, Green Energy LLC, and you think they're a renewable company, but they're selling natural gas. And they get to do that because there's such a general misconception in the public. We've done polling where we ask people, as the sketch that we saw a little bit earlier showed us, this is another thing that's different from the 70s. In the 70s, natural gas was derived by what we call conventional extraction, which basically means you set up a pipeline system underground in the gas well and the gas will flow out. You didn't have to do very much in addition. You didn't have to use a lot of water in the extraction process like you do with other fossil fuels, and so natural gas then was better from a water consumption perspective. Today, about 70% of the natural gas we produce in the United States comes from fracking. That's even more than the amount of oil we frack in this country, which is about 50%. So in terms of fracking, we frack more quote-unquote natural gas than we do oil. And a lot of people associate fracking with the oil industry. It's actually more heavily in use right now in the natural gas industry. It's another reason that we don't call it natural gas. We call it fracked gas because that's what it is now. And all of the gas that we get in our homes includes fracked gas because the gas is coming from different wells and it all goes into these centralized pipelines, and so all of the gas that we are consuming includes fracked gas. And that has negative consequences in the regions where the fracking is being done. It's connected to health issues with children, mothers, highly toxic water from the fracking process that pollutes nearby farmers' land where it's no longer usable, harms their animals, so that if they're raising animals for their income, then they can no longer sell those animals that were exposed to the fracking water. And that's just some of the consequences from the fracking. And so when you add that to the issues from the climate perspective, then natural gas is actually not a solution for us in terms of moving to a cleaner energy future. What we would be doing is basically staying in the same place while telling ourselves we're doing something better. And I think that we're sort of at a crossroads right now as a society where we can choose, okay, are we going to double down on the fossil fuel industry by leaving coal alone and going with natural gas? Or are we going to make a transition to something that is actually clean, actually going to help with the major problems that we are facing in terms of climate change and pollution? And I think that right now, the people like you all in this room that are hearing about this and talking about this truth about natural gas, you're about 10 years ahead of where society is in general in terms of our understanding about natural gas in this country. I think that about 10 years from now, when somebody says the term natural gas, everybody's gonna scoff. But right now we're at that place where we were with the cigarette industry when they were testifying in front of Congress that cigarettes are actually good for you. And so that's where we are with natural gas right now. The concept that natural gas is actually good for you is going to be something that is so laughable about 10 years from now. But we're at a point where we haven't caught up. And so when we're dealing with things like the Tacoma LNG terminal, and we're trying to say, you know, this actually is not going to reduce pollution in Tacoma. They only looked at a small part of the emissions profile. If you look at the rest of it, you see that it's actually not reducing emissions in Tacoma. And when you look at from a safety perspective, there's continuing to be more and more natural gas explosions. I was just reading about one the other day, where we have these aging pipelines. We have hundreds of miles of gas pipeline in the United States. Most of it was installed before 1970, early 1970s. And it has a lifespan. Metal pipelines have a lifespan, so they're leaking everywhere, like I said. And in addition, those leaks are sometimes causing fire hazards. So we're seeing more and more explosions in residential areas where these pipelines are not being replaced by the companies. like I said, I live in Seattle, and there was the commercial center of my old neighborhood in Greenwood Avenue was completely, 2 blocks of it were completely destroyed by a pipeline explosion. That pipeline was owned by Puget Sound Energy. That is building this LNG terminal. They received one of the largest fines in Washington state history because they were not maintaining their pipelines to standards. And when the Washington, UTC, Utilities and Transportation Commission, I believe, talked to them about, is this the only pipeline you have that's in this condition? They didn't know. And the UTC said, well, how long is it going to take you to find out? Oh, that could take us years and years to track down which pipelines have not been actually turned off, which pipelines that are not in service. This was the problem in Greenwood. The pipeline was supposed to have been turned off and not in service, but it still had gas coming to it. And when the agency asked them how many other pipelines might have this issue, they had no clue. How long is it going to take you to track it down? We don't know that either. And so when I hear this company talk about how they have such a wonderful safety record, all I have to do is look down the road from my house. I know that that's not true. I know that you don't even know what's going on with what you already have built, and you're trying to build something else in the middle of a populated area that has the potential to decimate miles of buildings, people, schools, and you have never run a facility like this. You don't have the experience, and the facility didn't receive an adequate enough safety review to give you good and strict guidelines to follow that would make up for where you lack the experience and expertise. And so for those reasons, I've been fighting this terminal for 3 years now. And we recently got, as Annette said, a victory where we had been asking the city of Tacoma since 2016 to do a supplemental environmental review. That means the first review you did was trash. I'm just going to be honest with you, it was trash. And what you need to do is to go back and do a supplement, because the first one you did is not adequate. And the law says there's a couple of things that can trigger that. If there's been a change to the facility, check. If there's new information that's been discovered that wasn't available at the time the review was done, check. So statutory requirements are met. We asked the city of Tacoma, will you please do a supplemental environmental EIS? Because first of all, nobody knew about this facility the first time you went through and reviewed it, so it slipped under the radar. The community had no idea what you were pushing on them. Now they know about it, they want to comment. If you open up another review, it'll give everybody an opportunity to comment and to say, will you look at this? Will you look at this? Will you look at this? The first round of the review, they gave a notification within 400 feet of the facility at the tide flats. Who lives within 400 feet of the facility at the tide flats? Okay, so some changes have been made since then in terms of notification. That's why y'all didn't know about the methanol terminal. That's why y'all didn't know about LNG, because they're notifying the nobodies that live within 400 feet of where these things would be built. And so we said, let's do a supplemental environmental impact statement, and been asking for that since 2016. And the city either not been responding or stonewalling question. In my perspective, the responses I received, I felt like they were kind of stonewalling my questions until the timer ran out. And so luckily, though, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency stepped in and they said, well, they didn't really say this, but they basically said, we agree with Tarika. She's 100% correct. And y'all need to do another review on this facility. And so they're looking at not just that small sliver of what the emissions profile looks like that allows me to tell you that it's cleaner than it really is. They're looking at the whole, they're looking at how much is going to be leaking out of the pipelines in the state of Washington. We are trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in this state. That is one of our main primary drives of our governor and our legislative bodies throughout the country and throughout the world. And we do not, so we need to take a look at how much gas is going to be leaking from these pipelines. And so they're doing a review that actually looks more at the full picture. But what that review doesn't include, that we still need to keep pushing for, and what the thing I'm going to ask you in my last 4 minutes. is the supplemental environmental review that the Clean Air Agency is doing is looking at air emissions. Okay, that's one of the things that was not adequately represented in the environmental assessment. It didn't tell the full picture. The other thing that I said was not adequately represented was the safety concerns. That they are not looking at. That is where we still need someone to step up to the plate, one of these agencies that has given this facility a permit to step up to the plate and say, there's a number of safety concerns here that have not been adequately addressed. And the Puyallup Tribe just recently hired 2 experts to take a look at that environmental impact statement I told you I read 3 years ago. And they, again, made the same conclusion. Tarika was right. This is a hot mess. It did not adequately review the safety issues that need to be reviewed, and therefore people who are within that blast zone of this facility are in danger. When you look at the, how many people have driven down around the tide flats? Look at the road conditions down there, looking at what would happen if there were a major incident and a large number of people need to be evacuated at once. Do you know that there is a detention facility close to where this facility would be built, where there are human beings housed there, and in the event of any sort of explosion at this facility, their safety guidance is to shelter in place, which means that their safety guidance is potentially to just die because they would not be evacuated. That's a human rights issue that is not really being looked at. How would these people be removed from that detention facility? And so the thing that we're continuing to try to ask the city of Tacoma to do is to do a supplemental environmental impact statement that, not what the Clean Air Agency is doing, looking at the pollution. We need you to do a supplemental environmental impact statement looking at safety issues. And are the people of Tacoma actually going to be protected in the event of an accident at this facility? And so that would be the thing that I would ask you to do going out of here this evening. If you see an opportunity in future to comment about this, to participate in asking for a supplemental environmental impact statement, it is desperately still needed for this facility because, once again, as I've concluded, as the Clean Air Agency has concluded, and as other experts have concluded, the facility was not adequately reviewed in any single way. And because nobody knew about it at the time, here we are some years later trying to fix it before it gets built. And in order to do that, we're going to have to make as much noise as we can in order to basically potentially save the lives of the people who were going to be living in close proximity to this facility, whether they're living free or whether they're locked up in a detention center. Everybody's lives are valuable and should be considered in the safety review process. And so I will continue, as I have been, prioritizing the Tacoma LNG issue until we continue to see some more movement. And I feel I'm just, you don't want this particular thorn in your side. I just won't stop until until I feel that you have adequately addressed the issues that are going to keep people safe, that you're actually listening to your constituents' concerns that they are raising. And in the absence of that, and the lack of that, is where it becomes my job as a researcher to step in and to provide the information that people use. And so, I'm not an activist. I'm a researcher, and I provide information on this facility. You can go on our website, sightline.org. I've written several articles about the facility that go into detail, 2 articles that go into detail about what the safety issues are and what was wrong with that permit. You go on sightline.org and search for Tacoma LNG. You can find those articles where I talk about it in much more detail than I can this evening. And so I invite you to do that. And I thank everybody again for coming out this evening to listen to us talk about this issue. And I hope that everybody will stay plugged in and keep putting the pressure on the people that we need to put the pressure on in order to get a supplemental safety review. And again, additionally, I want to stress how important it is to support the Puyallup Tribe in their fight against this facility. They are just one of the many constituents that was not consulted, but it is legal. I mean, it's in the law that you're supposed to adequately consult with affected tribes, and there was no, in addition to the other problems, there was no adequate consultation here. And so I will leave you with that, and welcome the next speaker.
We're going to sit up for Todd Hay. Todd Hay is works for NOAA. He's a scientist and data analyst, and he's also president of a group called Advocates for Cleaner Tacoma. So,
great, thank you, Barb. So again, my name is Todd Hay. I'm a president of a local nonprofit called Advocates for Cleaner Tacoma. ACT, as we call it for short. ACT started about a year and a half ago when five or six of us were looking around after going to a number of these environmental groups or environmental meetings, and we said, wait a second, we need to get ourselves organized. We need to actually start understanding what really is going on here with this particular facility, and start kind of trying to do a scientific analysis and really a true analysis of what's happening, so we can just make better judgment about it. So tonight, I'm not going to speak for very long, but I'm basically going to try to go through what the PSE narrative is on this story, and then I'm going to talk to you about what a counter narrative is on this story. And I'm not going to spend too long doing this, so we'll have questions at the end. So one of the big things about PSE is that they claim, as we can see here, if you can see it, they claim a couple things: that this is basically local, it's safe, and it's clean. And I basically want to kind of go through each of those arguments and really try to understand what they mean by that and where they might be misleading us on that. So let's start out with the local. So what's going on here, right? We have Puget Sound Energy. It's basically it's Washington's oldest utility. They service Puget Sound area with natural gas and electricity. Regulated by the UTC, Utility and Transportation Commission. They, in combination with an entity called Puget LNG, which I'll talk about in a second, are building this facility. They're splitting it roughly. It's about 47%, 53% in terms of who owns what of that. Puget LNG is a for-profit entity that will basically be selling shipping fuel to Tote Maritime. Tote Maritime runs 2 ships up and down to Alaska every week. And they will create local jobs as part of this, part of the construction process, and they'll produce about 16 to 18 permanent jobs once it's all built. So let's think about, is this really local? So when we look at the organizational structure, we have PSC over here on the left-hand side, our regulated utility. We have Puget LNG, which is a for-profit. They're basically siblings in this enterprise. They're both owned by this entity called Puget Energy on top of them. On top of that, we have a limited liability corporation. We have yet another entity, and these are all the entities here within Washington State. So this is all part of the kind of Puget enterprise, if you will, that's within Washington State. Up from there, then that's all owned by something called Puget Holdings, another limited liability based in Delaware. So all of a sudden, we're not even in Washington State anymore. So something in Delaware owns all of this. Even better than that, however, is that then, above on top of that, is we actually have a number of foreign entities that really own this whole enterprise. Some people may have heard of this group called Macquarie Group. It's a large Australian company. They actually technically still own about 40-some% of this entity. They recently made an announcement that they're trying to sell. And so they've actually made an announcement that they're trying to sell it to another Canadian entity and a Dutch entity. So it's entirely, if this gets approved by the Utilities and Transportation Commission, it'll be entirely a Canadian and Dutch-owned entity. So when they say it's local, I say not really. It's not really local at all. You think of where the profits are going for this, they go up. We know that with how these corporations work. So let's talk about is it safe? A lot of questions about safe. We heard Tarika raise that. I think there are a lot of interesting points. So let's just go through some of those first off. So this is their claim. We're using natural gas. Maybe we should start calling it methane gas, fracked gas, right? We're using natural gas just like you use in your homes all the time. It's not flammable in liquid form. That's true. And that they claim that this facility is being built to the highest industry standards. And they've modeled it against 200 what they call credible failure scenarios. And then any type of damage that would occur, it would all be retained within the 550-foot boundary of the property line itself. It's about 30-some acres in that space. Well, what are problems with this? Problem number one, they never actually did a scenario where they actually looked at a material breach. Yet, they sued twice to present release of their safety modeling documentation. And the reasons for that was, one is they said, well, there could be a terrorist attack against it. The second reason, after they lost that case, they said, well, Department of Homeland Security won't let us release this information per something called Critical Energy Information Infrastructure, CEII. CEII was established after 9/11 to prevent potential attacks on your critical infrastructure in the nation. So they claimed CEII. They lost both times in court. The documents were finally leaked to the News Tribune. So what's interesting about this is they claim, hey, we can't release this because it's a terrorist threat. But they never actually modeled a terrorist threat scenario. They never actually modeled a failure scenario, a material breach. So we think that's like, you can't have it both ways, folks. Either there is a terrorist threat or there isn't. And if there is, then you need to model it appropriately. What do we know in terms of modeling? We see a lot of different models out there. We hear about Sandia Labs. We could talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. I'm going to talk about what the Tacoma Fire Department actually did themselves. The day after the final environmental impact statement was released, November 9th, in 2015, that's when it was released. So the day after, on the 10th, they did their own modeling. This uses a model from the EPA and NOAA called LOA and Cameo. And basically they modeled, well, what would happen if they did have a breach in this facility? And this basically shows kind of what the methane leakage would look like, the extent of it. And this dark plume in here, that shows where you have a certain amount of parts per million of methane, a certain amount of methane that would be released in that area. And that's where you get immediately dangerous to life and health in that region. And so this whole space, that modeling zone is about 6,000 feet. Remember, PSC said it's all going to be within 550 feet of the buffer, or of the facility itself? Well, this is an order of magnitude larger. Now, people in the TFD fire department will come back and say, well, there's terrain right in here, it really won't go all the way up in there. That's a fair argument. The terrain, it rises a couple hundred feet there. But then I say, fair enough, but I know it would reach the Targa tank farm across the waterway, which is less than a half mile away. And that's a 40 million gallon tank plus tank farm of fossil fuels, all sorts of good fossil fuels, clean fossil fuels. Not. So we know it would reach that. Fairly interesting, we also know it would very much reach the new fire station they're looking to build, which is just across the road from it. It's literally 1,000 feet away. Tarika did a great article on the Williams LNG facility over in Plymouth that had an explosion 4 years ago. One thing she mentions in there is that during that explosion, there was a piece of shrapnel 250 pounds in size that blew out about 900 feet away. That's not too far from 1,000 feet away, folks. So it's just like, what are we doing? We're building a fire station right across from this facility. It's well within that, you remember I saw that really dark red plume where the methane release would actually be hazardous to life. It's well within that zone. So we kind of question that. Why are we building this here? It's just, like Tarika said, it's not a good spot to be building this right in this middle of this populated space. In terms of safety, another interesting thing is 2016, City of Tacoma did a climate resiliency study. They basically said, hey, what is sea level rise going to do to us here in Tacoma? And they looked at what's it going to look like in 2015, what's it going to look like in 2100? Well, this is basically the results, and they said, again, this is under extreme high tide scenario, right? So it's not going to be all the time, but there's a chance it can happen. Where is the plant located? It's right there. Nice little blue spot, that means it's basically inundated during a flooding scenario. So what does that do to the integrity of the facility when you're inundated in water? So we have a lot of security questions, a lot of safety questions here. And so I think Tarika is right that we should be asking, and we are asking for a supplemental EIS that focuses on safety, also focuses on health. We think that's another big issue as well. So let's talk about the cleanliness of this as well. We heard about the good natural gas that feeds this whole thing. So the claim is it reduces really 4 different components here. Particulate matter. Remember all that wood smoke we had over the summer? That's particulate matter. This is basically sulfur. This is some nitrogen, different compounds of that. And this is carbon dioxide. This is our greenhouse gas. So that's one claim, is that it reduces air pollution. The second one is it basically eliminates the need or a potential for a diesel spill over water. So we want to look at both of those claims. So first, let's look at LNG, right? Like Tarika said, at the point of combustion, it burns cleaner. There's no question about it. It's been demonstrated. It really does burn cleaner. And so you have to kind of break these out into, well, what do we have in terms of what are regional area impacts? i.e. they could affect our region some. And then what are our global impacts, right? CO2 being the global impact. So Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, there are, the entity that really was looking at our air quality in the area. Currently, of these different regional impacts, they have two what they call criteria air pollutants that are still of concern in the region. That means that they're still at a high enough level where they could be dangerous to our health. One of them is ozone, the second one's particulate matter. Sulfur oxide, sulfur dioxide, and the nitrogen variants of that as well, those are at such a low level that they're really not of concern to us in the region. They're still not good for us, but they're at a much lower level, so they don't pose a health hazard to us right now. So that's one thing. The other thing, and I'll talk about this a little bit, is, as Tarika said as well, Puget Sound Clean Energy does have this supplemental environmental impact statement effort underway for greenhouse gas emissions. We're actually expecting that to come out this weekend, the 7th of the month, and then we'll have about a month and a half to review it. We'll talk about that more towards the end of my slides. So I want to go into each of these a little bit more. So one thing is, so this is one of the tote ships, right? There are two of them that go back and forth to Alaska. You'll see them roll into the port here on Wednesday and Friday afternoons, about 2 p.m. or so. You'll see them come through the port. A couple things about tote. Back in 2010, so one thing is they actually converted to using what's called shore power. Typical vessels will come in and they'll continue to be burning their dirty diesel even when they're in shore, right? So they're basically polluting the local environment. Well, tote actually, back in 2010, they were the first ships in the Northwest to convert over to shore power. So they actually shut their engines down when they get into the port. They plug into electrical power, and then they're basically utilizing TPU's nice clean hydropower at that point. So they're not actually burning any diesel when they're in the port. And even when they're transiting into the port, they get about quarter, half mile away, and then they go into an idle mode, and actually then they have the tugs and whatnot start pushing the vessel actually into the final resting spot for it. So the amount of pollution actually generated right here in Tacoma, it's much reduced because of the shore power. The other thing is, last year, so tote had an exemption from the Environmental Protection Agency for a number of years. There are these international maritime organizations, a big UN body, basically mandated that, hey, we need our shipping industry to reduce the amount of sulfur that they emit into the atmosphere. And they need to do it by 2020. So they have some sulfur emission reductions. And so what happened was EPA gave tote an exemption, saying, hey, you don't need to reduce that yet because we're going to give you an exemption because you're going to build out these LNG, you're going to convert your ships over to LNG, right? So that's the whole plan. Well, that started taking a while. They ended up revoking that exemption. And they basically, so tote, back in 2017, they converted to using what's called ultra-low sulfur diesel. And so it dramatically reduces the amount of sulfur that they're burning when they're out in sea. And so as a result, tote is basically already compliant with the IMO, International Maritime Organization, and EPA's sulfur requirements. So if you ever hear say, hey, we have to meet these requirements, they've already met the requirements. The real thing is, though, is that natural gas is cheaper. And that's why they want to go that way. It's better for the finances. Let's talk about greenhouse gases real quickly. So what's the quick primer? You heard about greenhouse gases. We think of carbon dioxide, right? We need to think about something called the global warming potential. It's like you release a ton of carbon dioxide into the air, and that kind of has a global warming potential of what they could say basically one ton's worth, right? Carbon dioxide is like the unit of measurement. Natural gas, as you heard Tarika say, it's primarily methane, greater than 95% methane. It's basically methane. And the challenge with methane, as Tarika alluded to as well, is that when you have basically released 1 ton of methane, it's equivalent to releasing about 84 tons of carbon dioxide in one fell swoop. That's according to the UN's report from 2013. The challenge with that is back in 2016, they actually upped the number on that to 96 tons. The same basic scientists who did the study that fed this did a further study, and they integrated some more data into it. So it's just much dirtier, 96 times dirtier than carbon dioxide. The other thing we have then, so the basic idea here is that the general notion is that we have more than about a 3% leakage rate, that it basically becomes dirtier than coal. of natural gas up and down the pipeline where they're fracking, doing the distribution, transmission, where they're refining and whatnot. Well, there actually have been some studies by some different entities. My entity, NOAA, did a couple studies in the Denver Basin. They did one in the Los Angeles Basin, and then a private company did one in the Uinta Basin in Utah. And the rates, again, I remember I said if it's above 3%, we've got a problem. It's actually worse than coal. Well, in those regions alone, the lowest was 4% and the highest was 17%. Leakage rates we're talking now. So it makes it worse from a global warming perspective, much worse. The other interesting thing is when you actually look at the different types of gas, Tarika alluded to how we have conventional wells where they just kind of drill straight down and the gas bubbles up. Well, now they've done these big hydraulic fracturing where they drill down and then they'll shoot over shoot over a mile or so, shove a bunch of water and sand and proprietary chemicals down there, get it to crack into the substrate there, and then the gas flows up. Well, when you look at what happens at that fracking well, you start seeing the contributions of carbon dioxide and methane in a shell well, a fracking well, versus a conventional well, versus diesel oil when you're generating that, versus coal. Shell is much, much dirtier. The shell produced gas. And the vast majority of the gas coming into this plant are from shell plants, are from fracking sites, 75% or more. So it's just dirty. The second thing I'd say, so that's kind of the greenhouse gas bit. The second thing I just want to say is they have this notion out there that, hey, this is going to eliminate potential diesel spills in the ocean. The reality is the engines that they're equipping are what are called dual fuel engines. They can operate both on the bunker oil, the oil that they can burn, or natural gas. And so it doesn't eliminate the risk entirely. If they're still burning diesel out there, they have diesel on the boat. It could still spill and still pollute just as much. These are just issues I'm not going to address. Come talk with me a bunch more. We've done a lot of research. And everything from economics, is this even a viable project? There's some treaty rights. I might show one or two slides in talking with Annette about that. Some treaty rights issues there, due process, and whether this facility is even needed, right? UW Climate Impacts Group is postulating that we're going to have anywhere from like a 5 to 7 degree Fahrenheit degree increase in temperature over the next 20, 30, 40 years. How much peak shaving do we really need in the region then? And can it be met by existing capacity already? I don't think that's ever been analyzed, to be honest with you. The other thing to be careful about is who's gotten these flyers in the mail? A lot of folks. I think everyone in Tacoma should have gotten these things. So you'll see a lot of pretty images. You'll see a lot of terms like safe and clean. You'll see, this was over by my house. I got a kick out of this one. Next door to my house, they're putting a new natural gas line in someone's home. They pricked it and they caused a gas leak. And so when I see this truck pull up, I'm like, well, isn't that ironic? So they're sitting there spewing methane into the atmosphere for a couple hours, and I see that truck pull up. I'm like, that's very poetic, isn't it? So be careful. There's a lot of greenwashing going on here, where they're basically trying to say this is a much greener technology than it really is. Okay, so we've got this Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. They're doing a supplemental environmental impact statement. We've got a bunch of important dates coming up. We're expecting release of that SEIS this weekend. Public comment opens the day after on Monday. We can actually start submitting our feedback to PSCA about this whole project. There's a big effort to do some doorbell canvassing on the 13th. You can talk with some of the Sierra clubs in the back and get more information about that. We're going to do kind of a joint effort with Sierra Club, 350 Tacoma, hopefully 350 Seattle, and whatnot. Just get a bunch of the folks in here and do a big kind of public information section to you all to help you figure out what do you say at these public hearings? How do you effectively testify at a public hearing? So we really want your input. The more people, we want to pack the halls. And then there's a hearing on October 30th. That's TBD in terms of location. We want to pack the halls, though, when that happens. And then finally, the public comment period closes. That's it. I think I'll say one thing. I just want to show one thing for one backup slide on. One thing Annette asked me to raise is Puget Sound Clean Air Agency has to issue a permit, what's called the Notice of Construction Permit. It still has not been issued yet, even though they've been building. They basically claim that they're not building the portions of the plant that actually emit that cause air emissions. So that's how they're kind of getting around actually requiring this NOC permit. So they actually were issued a notice of violation back in April of last year. So that's one thing I want to mention. And so if you ask PSCA about this, they basically say PSC is building at their own risk because they may not get the approval with that notice of construction permit. That's one issue. The second one I just mentioned is with the tribe and their treaty rights, right? There's an 1854 Medicine Creek Treaty that basically guaranteed the tribe their kind of access to their natural and accustomed fishing rights, the grounds for the fishing rights. What's interesting is you look at the mapping of that, right? So here's a USGS map from the 1880s, and basically you'll see it looks very different than what the tide flats look like today because there's a ton of fill going on in here, right? Here's the tribal boundaries. So those are the boundaries that are agreed to in 1854, and then we have what the tide flats look like back in the day. You overlay those on top of each other. It looks like that. And you look at where the plant is actually located. It's located in the fill. It's located where the tribe used to fish. And so I would love to see the official documentation that where the tribe gives up their fishing rights in that area. This has been used successfully in court twice, and it's won in court twice. So they can't even necessarily prove that the ground upon which they're building, that they really have true property rights to it. It's a big problem in my opinion. Okay, that's enough for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. And now we have Sarah Corbett from Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Great. Thank you, and thank you, Todd, and thank you for all that you're doing, that amazing research. And yeah, thank you again to the conversation for planning this wonderful evening. So my name is Sarah Cornett. I am the Climate Program Organizer with Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. So we are a statewide organization of health professionals and other advocates working to prevent some of the greatest threats to human health that we face, and those include climate change and fossil fuel infrastructure. So tonight I'll be just kind of sharing some brief slides, kind of going back to what Todd and Tarika talked about earlier about why these projects and why this project in Tacoma represents a significant concern to human health. So I'll be using some materials adapted from Physicians for Social Responsibility, which is the larger national organization that's really done some amazing research about kind of quantifying the health impacts of both the fracking process and also the infrastructure needed to have these kinds of projects, from pipelines to compressor stations to now LNG. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you would like a copy of this presentation or have any questions about anything that I share. I would love to get in touch. So you can see my email address there. So as I mentioned, earlier this year, PSR, working with health professionals and primarily physicians in New York facing fracking in their communities, published a really amazing, extensive 300-page report chronicling the existing research on the health impacts of fracking, but also fracked gas. And there's a section in that report that focuses on LNG. So Rolling Stone actually did a great article announcing the report, which I thought was really exciting, that kind of publication was really giving this issue the attention it deserves. So I would encourage you to check that out.
What's the date of that?
I think it was in February of this year. Sometime in February, yeah. So what's the problem with natural gas? And we should be saying fracked gas. So it's both too dirty. It pollutes our air, land, and water. And because it's too dangerous, it drives climate change, and the infrastructure needed to refine, store, and unearth it is prone to significant safety hazards. So Todd mentioned particulate matter, PM 2.5. So what are some of the air pollutants associated with the whole process of deriving fracked gas to storing it and processing it? Volatile organic compounds, particulate matter. These are just two of the pollutants that pose significant health threats from all stages of the process. that really represent significant threats to human health. They can cause cancer, exacerbate asthma, worsen our cardiovascular health and cause heart disease, and also damage our brain function. So some of the most recent powerful research, Tarika mentioned this, really focuses on the impacts that these pollutants can have on children's health. So studies have shown that living near fracking sites increases your risk of being hospitalized for cancer, heart disease, skin-related problems, and damaged brain function. And people who live near fracking operations have also shown significantly worsened asthma symptoms. There's also a link between living near a fracking site and premature births and heart defects. So I thought this was a really cute image. This is the child of a physician activist in Pennsylvania fighting fracking on the ground there. So again, we're fortunate not to have fracking in Washington State, but when we think about building out the infrastructure needed to, deal with this vast amount of fracked gas, we need to consider and remember the communities upstream. And when we are increasing our demand for gas with a project like this, thinking about all of the health burdens and all of the risks associated with externalizing those costs to another community. So pipelines, and both Tarika and Todd kind of mentioned this. So pipelines carry their own unique risks. They can explode and they leak. I loved how Tarika said, you never know. The gas leaks everywhere and we can't see it. And we also can't ignore climate change. So the statistic that I usually use is methane is 86 times more potent than CO2 over a 20-year time frame. And all of us remember this summer, the wildfire smoke. We think about the natural disasters and the extreme heat impacts. We are already seeing the impacts of our changing climate, and we know that this is a health issue. It's harming our air. It's creating these risks of these extreme weather events that force us to leave our homes. And doing anything, locking ourselves into this infrastructure to only continue these impacts, we really can't allow ourselves to continue to do that. So LNG, looking specifically at the unique risks that LNG poses. So first and foremost, it's increasing this demand for fracked gas and this process of fracking, which we know is so dirty and so harmful to human health. Safety. So Tarika did a really good job again, kind of outlining those safety concerns. An LNG terminal is inherently, flammable and carries a significant risk of explosion. There was a study, and I'm going to look at my notes just because the line was so powerful in it, from 2008, saying that LNG infrastructure is, quote, inherently attractive to terrorists because of its unique and highly flammable components as a storage facility. And again, is LNG really clean? So when we think, and I think Todd did a really great job kind of showing that kind of misleading information about how this facility is displacing a dirtier diesel bunker fuel. When we look at recent studies that really do analyze the impacts of dual fuel engines that look at the pollutants associated with burning LNG as a fuel for ships, while some things go down, like particulate matter, which is a really harmful pollutant that can go deep into lungs and make it really hard for us to breathe, other pollutants significantly go up. So methane, of course, when you're using this as a shipping fuel, significantly increases. And this is, again, something that we don't know enough about. There really needs to be more comprehensive research done before we can truly understand the impacts of using LNG in this way. So what are health professionals doing? So the health voice, both the message and the messenger, can kind of carry with it a unique credibility. Gallup always ranks nurses as the #1 most trusted profession, nurses. You probably, if your nurse tells you to do something, you're probably going to listen to that person, right? So health professionals and people sharing these messages of protecting human health can often kind of transcend historic divides in conversations around environmentalism. So really framing with the health message can be a very powerful tool. So earlier this summer, health professionals with WPSR and working with Puyallup physicians and other Native physicians sent a letter to Governor Inslee saying that the state's health professionals were really concerned about this project and were standing and showing solidarity with the tribe and requesting that the governor really do everything in his power to help us better understand these impacts and do something to ultimately stop this project. 350 Tacoma, another wonderful activist group. There's a working group within 350 comprised of nurses and physicians that's earlier this summer, published a really cool blog post linking the connections between the pollutants that cause asthma, climate change, and this project. So I would encourage you, if you're curious, to go to their website and check out that blog post. We also know that there are going to be some really key opportunities coming up to testify. So this photo is from a nurse in Tacoma, Kenra Brewer, testifying at City Council last fall when we were kind of talking about this project and to City Council members. She also had a letter to the editor published in the News Tribune. So when we're thinking about, what are we going to do with all this information after tonight, we have some key opportunities, especially this public hearing on October 30th, to really share this information powerfully. And public testimony is not as scary as it seems. So what's next? If you are a health professional or work in the healthcare field, we've been working with nursing faculty at Pacific Lutheran University to create a sign-on letter for health professionals expressing concern about fossil fuel projects in Tacoma. If you do work in the healthcare field, please sign on to the letter. I have it at a table in the back, and you're welcome to contact me afterwards. And write a public comment when the period opens up. And as Todd mentioned, that will probably be early next week, fingers crossed. So mark these dates in your calendar. I know October is going to be an extremely busy month, but in addition to October 30th, on the 23rd, we'll have a really key opportunity to take a step to ensure that we don't have to see more projects like this in our community. So the Tacoma City Council will be considering a renewal of the current moratorium on new fossil fuel projects. And what we can do in this meeting and at this juncture is encourage the city to expand this moratorium to include expansions of existing projects. So not just stop new proposals, but also make sure that the projects we have currently in Tacoma, these huge fossil fuel projects, that they can't keep expanding without more notice and without more community input. So these are going to be two opportunities in which we can really show up and encourage a cleaner, healthy community. And thank you. I know that all of this information can I'm sure, be a little bit overwhelming. I know when I first started this job, Tarika was kind enough to sit down with me, and I was like, what is going on with this LNG project, Tarika? I read her article talking about the Plymouth explosion in Washington of a similar facility, and I just couldn't wrap my head around all the conflicting messages. And sometimes it's so hard when we have so much information coming at us to kind of really sit down and understand it all. So just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and for doing all that you're doing, because it is hard work, but we know that by doing it, we're really passing on a better future for our kids, for the next generation, and for those of us who are living here right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. And we have Les Pogue from The Conversation.
Good evening, all. What to do with all that information? Seems like a whole lot. I want to give up respect to the tribe Puyallup, the nation of the Puyallup people, for letting us hold this event on this land. I want to give respect to Ms. Tarika Powell for presenting us with so much information, and Mr. Todd Hay and Sarah Cornett for their presentations as well. My name is Les Pogue, and I'm a member of a group called The Conversation. We're a social justice group volunteering our time to work out issues that exist in Tacoma and Pierce County, and especially here in the Northwest. We've taken a lot of information that we've learned. The group here tonight that is hosting and put this thing on tonight, Barb Church, Miss Oneida Arnold, Miss Norma Ramirez, and myself, Les Pogue Jr. What's up?
UPS students and Jack back there, they help with the Andrew.
Thank you to all who helped out with this. So I'm going to get back to what I'm talking about. So in all of this frustration with working on the methanol project, shutting that down, and the LNG came through, and going to all these presentations and receiving this information and seeing the majority of people who are gathering this information are not people that look like me, people of color, people of culture, brown and black people who are #1 in asthma rates in the hilltop because of the existing fossil fuels industry down at the tide flats. So it frustrates me at times to go to all these functions and gather all this information and not have it spread to the majority of folks in Tacoma, because that's what it's going to take for us to present to city council and present to city governments to change this moving towards fossil fuels expansion. You know, there's only a small group of people who are showing up at these city council meetings, who are showing up at these PSCAA information sessions, and they don't look like me. So when we gathered this information, the group that I just spoke of, we made an effort to show people of color at the city council meetings to speak on these issues. We wrote a request for SEIS to the city of Tacoma from Tarika's guidance. That's what we do with this information. And this information needs to be spread to all the folks in Tacoma, because that's what it's going to take for us to change this, to stop this. Not the same people that we see all the time at these functions. I give respect to the Puyallup tribe, because the Puyallup tribe, the Lummi tribe, Nisqually, the Muckleshoot, they're the reason why I met Tarika, because at their totem celebrations is how Tarika was invited to speak at all of these celebrations. And I learned of Tarika through the tribal representation who has been fighting these environmental degradations for decades and centuries. So, with that being said, what do we do with all this information? We did it. We wrote our request. We've spoken to City Council several times to the point of frustration, and to have them answer our request for SEIS with, you didn't bring up anything new that wasn't included in our FEIS, the final environmental impact statement, which is infuriating. Because with the information we learned from Tarika, with information from Todd Hay, with information from Steve Storms, Redefine, all these groups that are out here working on this, they still gave us a negative response as if they didn't even read our request for SEIS. So I beg of you tonight to speak to people that don't look like you. Get them interested in this situation and fill the City of Tacoma's governance with questions from other people that don't look like the same people that are sitting across from you. Because that's what we need to change this. I respect you all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have a panel that sits up on the stage and receives questions from the audience, which we should have some time for that. We've got like 20, 25 minutes, and I will cut my time short to allow for that questions from the folks out here. So.
Okay, so thank you first of all for coming down. Now I can hear it. I'm delighted that we have this opportunity. As you were speaking, Tarika, and I was listening, something was coming up for me, and I want to ask a question about it. So we know that part of the pollution that's going to come out of the plant under normal operations include benzene and toluene, which are both implicated in a rise in brain cancer. And we know that the entity that did the health study for this fiasco was Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. So they came back and said it was all fine and dandy. That's part of the inadequacy of the study. So if we are to pursue a supplemental environmental impact study and then a statement on health, and our health department has already done an inadequate study, where do we pursue that health study to be done from?
So you're right. Tacoma Pierce County Health Department came back with a one-page, all looks fine with this.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to elevate it to the Washington State Department of Health
Okay.
at that point.
Okay.
And just, we could try to go back to Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. I'm not sure they're going to be responsive to any requests for an additional assessment. You know, they did, after this project was started, they did come back and make kind of a proclamation that any new projects of similar nature, that they would require a health assessment. Fortunately, this was grandfathered in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we probably have to go to the state level and see if
Okay.
they would use it.
So of the city stonewalls on ordering a supplemental environmental health impact study, can we proceed by writing letters to the state? What's it called again? The state?
Department of Health.
The State Department of Health. Could we prime the pump, so to speak, with letters to the State Department of Health, and that way maybe put pressure on the lower agencies?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think so.
Yeah, some of you, if you've been following the coal export terminal fight in Millennium, the Millennium is the name of the company, but they are proposing to build a coal export terminal in Longview, Washington, and activists there were successful in urging what they call a health impact assessment, or an HIA for short. So you can petition the Department of Health. It's possible to do that, to have a study done that specifically looks at health impacts. I know that folks there, it's kind of created a lot of additional headache in certain respects, and I would be happy to kind of talk to you afterwards about that process and other ways we could consider doing that for this project. But I think there are avenues that we could explore for better understanding those health impacts.
I have a couple of, I want to remind everybody on YouTube, if you type in Tarika, T-A-R-I-K-A, Powell, there's two really great videos there. One's about 3 minutes, and it's all about how she tried to get information from the city, how they stonewalled, how it was crazy. But we need to know that that's what our city did, and that's how we got here. There's a 3-minute video and a 45-minute video from testimony back, I think, in February. Please see that. And then write letters to the editor, write letters to the city. We have to get our city back. I'm interested if it's going to be exported. From everything that I read around the world, what's going on globally, the pressure I personally feel just for reporting on stuff here, it's clearly a very big deal. And I believe that it's going to eventually be exported. I know that Sabine Pass started as an import facility and is now an export facility. They're not going to tell us they're going to do that. They're just going to do it. In my opinion, I want your opinion. The Massachusetts explosion is that there's an LNG, I think, peak shaver 27 miles away from those explosions in Andover and those towns, Lawrence, do you think that had anything to do with that LNG facility? Is it possible that that overpressurization happened as a result of, or part of that peak shaving setup, which is what PSA claims this one is, but we know it's much more than that. Thank you, Tarika. Do you think that the export issue is dependent on whether Jordan Cove is approved to become an exporter or not? Will that take the pressure off of us? And that's a terrible place for us to be between us and them. We have to fight together to kill both of them. Trains, do you think they're going to export it on trains?
All right.
And how do we overcome the lies?
Okay. So Kathy asked a couple of questions. A couple of them are connected. And the export issue and the trains issue. So Kathy asked, is it possible that this could become an export facility in the future? Yes, it is possible. It's very common for an LNG facility to start out as one type of facility and then convert to another use. A number of existing export facilities were first proposed as an import facility. And so in order to do that, essentially what they would have to do is, it doesn't produce enough in the current form to export. But yes, it is feasible that in future the facility could be expanded. That's not uncommon either. There's one facility right now in near Vancouver, BC, that has been operating for about 60 years as a local terminal that's now converting to an export terminal. So yes, that could happen. They would have to go through another permitting process that hopefully people would hear about this time. But yes, it is feasible, and it's not uncommon that these types of terminals will change form depending on what the needs are in the market. And so right now, Puget Sound Energy thinks there's going to be a market in terms of transportation, so they're trying to turn this into a transportation hub. And one thing about that I want to mention is we talked about how LNG has a break-even point with coal. And we talk about that break-even point, we are actually talking about natural gas or frac gas being used to generate electricity. When we look at other uses, you actually reach the break-even point much sooner if you have any benefits at all. So for example, scientist named Ramon Alvarez was the lead scientist. I think he's with the Environmental Defense Fund. He is one of the few people out there researching the use of natural gas as a transportation fuel. And what he determined is that if you have a fleet of vehicles running on diesel and you convert that fleet to CNG propulsion, compressed natural gas, he studied how long will it take for you to see benefits in terms of global warming and climate change? How long will it take for you to see benefits from that switch? And what his study found is that if you convert that fleet from diesel to natural gas, it will actually be worse for climate change for about 300 years. And at that point, after 300 years, it will be 10% better. So for 300 years, it's worse. And after that, it's only 10% better. And so right now, what we're looking at is the gas industry is trying to lock itself in. Okay, people are getting away from coal. They're looking at other fossil fuels, these oil trains blowing up. And so the industry is like, well, what else can I sell? And I already pointed out that the big players in the natural gas industry are the big players in the oil industry. And so they're trying to, as everybody's trying to make this transition to renewables and get off fossil fuels, they're trying to pair natural gas and slip it in there and make us think that that's cleaner. And basically what that will do is lock us into it for several decades. Once we build an infrastructure, we're going to have to keep using it. Nobody's going to want to take that investment that I just made 10 years ago and get rid of all that infrastructure. And so right now we're at, like I said, sort of a crossroads where we can make this choice that will lock us into fossil fuels for several more decades. Or we can make the choice to say, you know what, this is a bridge to nowhere, not a bridge to renewables, and so we're going to go ahead and pursue the renewable solution. But on your question of what is it that the facility can do in the future, So like I said, if they want to change the exports, they're going to have to get some more permits. But there are a number of things that they can do in that facility that are different from what they were approved for, where they will not require any further review. It actually says that in the EIS. If it is something that's considered within the scope of the original proposal, you don't have to have further review. Well, as I was telling you all earlier, if you read the original proposal, it's really hard to tell what's within the scope of it in the first place. And so it would be a little bit difficult to determine what's outside the scope. And so a number of things can slip in, and one of them is that there's the possibility that LNG will be moved by rail also. When this project was first proposed, it was illegal at the federal level to transport LNG by rail. And that has been changing. We now have it moving by rail in Alaska and Florida. And the Federal Railroad Administration is sort of doing approvals on a state-by-state basis, basically because the fossil fuel industry is lobbying them. They used to make a lot of money transporting coal by rail. Again, coal shipments have dramatically gone down with people not using coal. And so the industry is trying to basically sell this new partnership with shipping natural gas by rail, which has previously been illegal because it's so dangerous. And so with the railroad industry in the United States struggling financially, the fossil fuel industry is coming to the railroad industry with this solution. Now we can ship natural gas by rail, and so it's slowly being approved. And so it's possible. The BNSF is one of the biggest lobbyists to move natural gas by rail, and they come through Tacoma. And so that's a possibility. It was not reviewed in the original EIS. It won't have to be reviewed if it happens in the future.
That's how it applied to Holland.
And so I think that answers the question.
I just wanted to
About the railways.
I just had one additional comment on the export question. So this facility is generally, it's much smaller than typical export facilities. However, there's one caveat here. Recently, actually, the Department of Energy, they set up a regulation whereby they actually started looking at what do small-scale LNG exports look like. To the tune of like, small scale defined it to about, we have like less than 250,000 gallons of production per day, which is exactly the threshold where we're talking about here right now. So DOE has a regulation in place to support that without additional environmental review. And it's mainly to support South American countries that are seeking the same kind of gas. The House of Republicans, the federal U.S. House of Republicans, I should say the U.S. House, just passed a bill basically approving that same, trying to put that as a statute, trying to make that law actually, not just a regulation within DOE. It's gone through the House, it's been approved, it's not been approved in the Senate yet. So get out and vote, is what I said.
So let's go to the next question.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for sharing your brain power with us. So we have this big action coming up on October 30th, and I kind of want help understanding the scope of what the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency can do. Let's assume that we get 500 to 1,000 of our friends to come to this meeting. We study the report, we give all the best testimony, and we convince people. What can they do? Are there other, so of course we want them to deny a permit, that's a great thing. Are there other things that will also feel like wins, that are steps in the right direction, things that we can use? How many things can we advocate for? What is it? Thanks, y'all.
So I'll go first, and I'll let other people talk. So what I would hope for is that the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency's permit is critical to whether or not this facility gets built. What they actually are going to be issuing is a construction permit that Puget Sound Energy was supposed to obtain before they started building anything on that site. They're so seemingly arrogant that without receiving all the permits, they went ahead and started constructing. And if the Clean Air Agency does its supplemental review and it determines that this facility is not meet certain criteria, they could deny that construction permit, and then Puget Sound Energy would essentially have to either cease what they're doing or tear down what they have already constructed. Or make changes to the facility where it would produce less pollution than the study has determined that it's going to produce. And so there's a couple of outcomes that you could advocate for. One outcome would be denied a construction permit. Okay, the facility's dead. It's done. Another would be that the way that this facility is currently designed is going to produce too much pollution to meet our air pollution criteria here in Washington State, so you're going to have to go back and redo the design of the facility. That would also be a win, because that would open up a window for us to go back and look at other aspects of the design that affect other issues like safety and other questions that people have, perhaps give an opportunity to actually have meaningful consultation with the tribe. That could open up a lot of opportunities if we're talking about looking at the design of the facility. Another potential outcome, I think with the supplemental environmental impact statement, what it opens up is, one of the important things to me is the opportunity for people to actually have their voices heard. And so when you talk about 500 to 1,000 people potentially showing up and or giving some comments on this to talk about what they're concerned about, because a number of things that were not heard in the original review is not just the voice of tribal members, voices of communities of color. Les talked about higher asthma rates among African Americans. That's true nationally as well. And a lot of times when you have these heavy polluting facilities that can have a disproportionate impact on communities of color, the communities of color are never notified, right? We talked about the 400 feet. And so one thing that we could think about, and one thing that I've been thinking about heavily, is when we have this review process, how can we get comments and participation from communities that are disproportionately impacted, even if they're not within the notification zone of what you're talking about. And I don't know if that looks like sending letters to the major churches in the area or sending letters to major community centers to notify people, but I think that we need to have a number of changes with who we actually notify about this based on who actually has the worst health outcomes. And so those are the things I can think of. I can give other people an opportunity.
For instance, 2 weeks ago, Monday morning, when the lithium-ion battery fire was down at the steel scrapyard, I live right here on 25th and Yakima. I opened my door at 7 a.m. to a toxic cloud. It was unbreathable. I refused to go outside because it was just toxic. There was a lady playing with her children outside at about 8:30 a.m. I stepped outside and I said, "Hey, you guys shouldn't be out here playing in this. This is a toxic cloud." The port had shut down industry because the air was so bad. I don't know if I've ever heard of that happening. And the lack of education to the communities that are being affected by these toxic clouds that are pretty constant if you have lived here for a little while. I can smell it every day. With the combination of, if this LNG facility goes through, adding that on top of what's already existing is enough to make people just cry out in the streets. So the messaging that tells community, hey, this is affecting your health every day, even without the LNG. So I think one way to promote it is adding LNG on top of what's already existing should scare people into participating into these community efforts. Our group, the conversation, has started an effort to have these community conversations. Our first one was at Bay Terrace. It was very lightly attended, but we're still putting that effort into getting that message across to communities that aren't being communicated to. You know, that's a big issue if we want to change anything in Tacoma, is we have to have more, the majority. This is a democracy. We need a majority of people speaking to governance to change their mentality of accepting fossil fuels money.
They never even told me.
So we'll take one more question, and I'm sorry, but maybe you can corner some of the panelists, all but Tarika because she has to drive all the way to Seattle, but we have to clean up and be out of here by 9. So we'll just take your question, and sorry, you guys, you can.
I was going to say, have any of the Washington State legislators or the Tacoma mayor
come out about this and said anything at all about this?
Mayor should support it.
Washington state legislators, not that I know of. And I think that one issue that we're dealing with legislators is that they have to promulgate rules on so many issues that touch on every area of human life in their state or in the nation. And as a result, it's very difficult for them to be fully informed on any one of those particular topics. That's why they have staff that will give them a brief of, before they make a vote. And I think that one of the issues that we're seeing right now is that legislators, and I'm not just talking about at the state level, but are very wed to natural gas. One of those reasons, quite frankly, natural gas companies, major donors to PSC is donated to basically every elected official in the state of Washington. I'm not sure if that's why we haven't gotten any movement on this issue. No idea. But they're receiving lots of information from that side about clean and green. And they're only now am I seeing these electeds start to be more educated about the actual truth about natural gas. And I think that we still have work to do on the legislators to be able to sit down and say, I know you're busy, you're working on 5,000 issues, but I want to talk to you for 5 or 10 minutes about natural gas and give you this information. We are still, I think, dealing on both state and federal level with legislators who are not fully informed as you are right now about the actual truth about natural gas, and furthermore, have some financial incentives from the industry to pursue these sorts of projects.
Jeannie Darneal and Lori Jenkins both signed a resolution opposing the LNG plant.
Yes, and that's not to say every person, but I'm saying what I have experienced in trying to communicate with people is that I hear them repeating back to me language that's exactly what the fossil fuel industry says about natural gas. It's a bridge fuel, it's cleaner, and this is where they're getting their education. They spend a lot more time around lobbyists than they do around researchers like myself. And so that's one of the uphill battles. We have the same uphill battle with the legislators that we do with the general public, is that they have a false perception of what natural gas or fracked gas really is. In terms of mayor, I know that Mayor Wooders has expressed in the past that she thinks that this facility could be beneficial to the city from the perspective of jobs, that it could be cleaner for the city. I've met with the mayor and talked to her about the concerns that I raised tonight and what my research has found. And I would say that in our meeting, she was receptive to the information that I was giving to her. I cannot speak on her behalf about where she stands on the facility. I can just say, in the past, she has made supportive comments, and I met with her to share more information, and that's all I can share. Anybody else?
So the mayor has a letter supporting this particular activity, and like the woman in the audience mentioned, Senator Darnell and Jenkins have come out. We actually met with Senator Darnell at one point, and it was a very interesting conversation. She talked about talking with PSC. I don't want to go into all the details, but at one point, I kind of talked to her, and we said, hey, look, you do realize, she was talking to someone from PSC, and they were telling, hey, we're not going to sell this stuff, right? We're going to, it's just for regulated and whatnot. And I said, well, you have to realize who you're talking to, right? These are two entities involved here. There's PSC and there's Puget LNG. She was talking to a PSC person. He says we're not going to do all this bunkering and whatnot. It's the Puget LNG, the for-profit wing, that's doing all the maritime fuel portion. You can just see her light bulb turn on right like, oh,
Thank you so much, speakers, panelists, and audience for being here, listening. Now you have some information, so Go take it and make a difference. I see some UPS students here. I want to acknowledge you, that I appreciate you being here, and all of the young people. Thank you.